If you've ever planned a wedding, you know it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a year-long odyssey of spreadsheets, taste tests, and navigating the delicate politics of family seating charts. For my fiancé and me, it was supposed to be the most exciting project of our lives. At 30 years old, we'd built our careers, and we're finally ready to build our future, starting with one perfect day. Our dream started with a place. 12 months before our wedding date, we stood on a manicured lawn staring up at a magnificent old building called the Grand Willow Estates. The name sounds like something out of a storybook, and it looked the part. A gorgeous, sprawling manor with ivy climbing the stone walls and ancient willow trees that wept gracefully over a sparkling blue lake. It wasn't just a venue, it was an experience. It had a timeless, elegant feel that screamed forever. We knew instantly that this was where we would promise our forevers to each other. Getting a date there was like winning the lottery. They were booked years in advance, but by some miracle, a cancellation had opened up a perfect Saturday in autumn, exactly 1 year from then. We didn't hesitate. We signed the contract and paid the non-refundable deposit on the spot. This was our victory, paid for entirely from our own savings. We'd worked extra hours, squirreled away bonuses, and skipped vacations for 2 years to afford it. Our parents hadn't contributed a dime, and we hadn't asked them to. The booking was legally and financially ours, a testament to our partnership. We left that day floating on a cloud, clutching the contract like a golden ticket. For the next 8 months, life was a blur of happy, stressful wedding planning. We chose the caterer, booked the band, and my fiancé found her dress. Every decision was a brick we were laying in the foundation of our new life. My sister Ruby is 2 years younger than me. At the time, she was 28. We'd always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, I was the quiet, steady one, and she was the firecracker. She had a magnetic personality that drew people in, but there was always a competitive streak to her. If I got an A on a test, she had to get an A+. If I made the varsity soccer team, she had to become captain of the cheerleading squad. It was never hostile, just this constant, low-humming sibling rivalry that we never quite outgrew. As adults, it mostly manifested in harmless ways, like trying to one-up each other with Christmas presents for our parents. I thought it was just our dynamic. I never saw it as a warning sign. About 4 months before my wedding, Ruby called a family dinner. There was an electric energy in the air that signaled big news. She and her long-term boyfriend sat at the table, practically vibrating with excitement. Then they made the announcement Ruby was pregnant. The room erupted. My parents were crying tears of joy. My fiancé and I were cheering, hugging them both. I was genuinely thrilled. I was going to be an uncle. I immediately started imagining teaching my future niece or nephew how to throw a baseball. It was a beautiful, purely happy moment for our family. But then something shifted. It was subtle at first, so small I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. The wedding planning, which had been a frequent topic of family conversation, suddenly took a back seat. Every phone call, every visit now revolved around Ruby's pregnancy. And that was fine. It was huge news. But Ruby started making little digs disguised as jokes. We'd be discussing floral arrangements and she'd sigh dramatically and say, "Must be nice to only have to worry about the color of peonies. I'm over here trying to create a human being." Everyone would chuckle and I'd smile along, but an uneasy feeling started to curdle in my stomach. She started asking strange questions about the wedding, too. They were always framed with a casual curiosity, but in hindsight, they were targeted reconnaissance. "Hey, how much was that deposit at the Grand Willow again?" she asked me one day over the phone. "Is it really, totally non-refundable? That seems so strict." I answered her questions thinking she was just making conversation. I told her yes, the deposit was ironclad, a significant chunk of money that we would never get back if we canceled. I explained that was standard practice for a venue of that caliber. "Wow," she'd said, a weird note in her voice I couldn't quite place. "You guys are really locked in then." The tension started to build like the low-pressure system before a hurricane. The family dynamic began to warp around Ruby's pregnancy. She wasn't just Ruby anymore. She was the vessel for the family's first grandchild. Her every whim was catered to. Her moods, which became increasingly volatile, were excused with a wave of a hand and a knowing, "Oh, you know hormones." My parents, who had always prided themselves on treating us equally, began to prioritize her needs in a way that felt unbalanced. My fiancé noticed it too. We'd go over for dinner, and the entire conversation would be about Ruby's doctor's appointments or her search for the perfect crib. If we tried to bring up the wedding to share a piece of our own joy, we were met with polite but distracted nods before the conversation was inevitably steered back to the baby. It felt like our once-in-a-lifetime event was being downgraded into a minor inconvenience, a party happening in the background of the much more important main event. The final alarm bell came during a conversation with my mom. She called me, her voice laced with a forced cheerfulness that always meant she was about to ask for something difficult. She talked about Ruby, how stressed she was, how she felt her life was changing so fast. She mentioned that Ruby and her boyfriend were now talking about getting married, and soon. "You know," my mom said, her voice dropping a little, "Ruby just feels like everything is happening out of order for her. She always dreamed of having the perfect wedding before the baby arrived." I remember saying something supportive like, "Well, they can still have a beautiful wedding. They can go to the courthouse now and have a big party later." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Then my mom said, "She just had her heart set on a big traditional wedding. It's a shame all the good places are booked up so far in advance." The implication hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. A cold dread crept up my spine. They couldn't possibly be thinking what I thought they were thinking. I ended the call quickly, telling my fiancé I was just being paranoid. But I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The joyful runway to my wedding day had just become a minefield. That paranoia clung to me like a damp coat for the next week. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being a typical stressed-out groom. My fiancé, bless her heart, tried to reassure me. We'd be sitting on the couch finalizing our guest list, and I'd just go quiet. She'd put her hand on my arm and say, "You're thinking about your mom's phone call again, aren't you?" And I'd nod, feeling foolish. "It was just a weird comment, honey," she'd say. "Your mom was probably just venting for Ruby. It doesn't mean anything." And I wanted to believe her. I really did. We had poured our hearts, our time, and a significant amount of our savings into this wedding. It was our dream, a day we had been meticulously crafting for the better part of a year. The thought that someone in our own family might see that dream as a resource to be plundered, it was just too ugly to contemplate. So I pushed it down. I focused on the task at hand, writing our vows, picking out a suit, coordinating with vendors. Life went on, and for a couple of weeks, the tension seemed to dissipate. Ruby was quiet. The weird comments stopped. I let myself believe the storm had passed. I was an idiot. The storm hadn't passed. It had just been out at sea, gathering strength, turning into a Category 5 hurricane that was about to make landfall directly on my life. The confrontation happened exactly 3 months before our wedding day. It wasn't a dramatic shouting match in the middle of a family dinner. It was quieter, more surgical, and 1,000 times more chilling. My fiancé and I had just gotten home from work. We were in the kitchen making dinner music, playing softly from a little speaker on the counter. We were happy. We were talking about our honeymoon plans, laughing about my terrible attempts to learn a few phrases in Italian. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. It was Ruby. She was alone, standing on my doorstep with a look of grim determination on her face. I opened the door, forcing a smile. "Ruby." "Hey, what's up?" "This is a surprise." She didn't smile back. She just looked past me into the apartment. "Is she here?" she asked, her voice flat. She meant my fiancé. "Yeah, we're just making dinner. Come on in." She stepped inside, and the entire atmosphere of our home changed. The warmth and laughter evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy silence. My fiancé came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her smile faltering when she saw the look on Ruby's face. "Hey, Ruby, everything okay?" she asked, her voice full of genuine concern. Ruby didn't answer her. She kept her eyes locked on me. "We need to talk, Ezra," she said. "It's important." I gestured to the living room. "Okay, have a seat. Do you want some water or something?" She shook her head but walked over and sat stiffly on the edge of our couch. My fiancé and I exchanged a worried glance and sat on the armchair opposite her. The silence stretched on thick and uncomfortable. Ruby just sat there staring at her hands in her lap. She was 3 months pregnant at this point, so she wasn't really showing yet, but she placed a hand on her stomach in a way that was both protective and performative. It was a gesture meant to remind us of the stakes before the conversation had even begun. Finally, she looked up, her eyes bypassing me and landing on my fiancé. "I'm just going to say this." She began, her voice gaining a strange, rehearsed strength. "What I'm about to ask is for the good of the family. It's not about what any one of us wants. It's about what's necessary." My fiancé just nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Ruby then turned her gaze to me. It felt like being pinned by a spotlight. "Ezra," she said, her voice dropping, "I need you to give me your wedding venue." I think I actually laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of disbelief. It had to be a joke. A horribly timed, deeply unfunny joke, but a joke nonetheless. What I asked, a grin still plastered on my face. "Give you the... What are you talking about?" "Ruby." Her expression didn't change. It was deadly serious. "The Grand Willow Estates," she said, spelling it out as if I were a child. "I need the booking. You and your fiancé need to cancel your wedding there so that I can have mine." The smile slid off my face. The air in the room felt thin, hard to breathe. I looked at my fiancé. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Her jaw was slightly open, her eyes wide. She looked like she'd just been slapped. I turned back to my sister. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, I am completely serious," she replied, leaning forward, her intensity ramping up. "I am pregnant, Ezra. I am 3 months pregnant. My boyfriend and I, we have to get married, and we have to do it soon, before I get, big. I can't walk down the aisle looking like a whale. It has to happen on your date. It's the perfect time." She said it all so matter-of-factly, as if she were explaining a simple logistical problem that had an equally simple solution. As if our wedding was just a placeholder, a reservation that could be easily transferred like a library book. My fiancé found her voice first. It was quiet but steady. "Ruby, we booked that venue 12 months ago. We've been planning this for a year." Ruby waved a dismissive hand as if a year of our lives was a minor inconvenience. "I know that, but things have changed. My situation is more urgent. This isn't just a party for me. This is about giving my child a proper family, a name. It's about not bringing shame on our parents. Don't you understand I need this? You guys just want it." That was the line. The line that took me from stunned disbelief to a cold, simmering anger. The audacity, the sheer mind-bending entitlement of it all. "You need it," I repeated, my voice rising. "You think we don't? We signed a legally binding contract, Ruby. We paid a non-refundable deposit, a deposit that cost thousands of dollars, money that we saved for years. If we cancel, we lose all of it. Not to mention we'd have to cancel everything else. The caterer, the photographer, the band. We'd have to tell 150 guests that the wedding they've already booked flights and hotels for is, just not happening anymore." "It's just money, Ezra," she shot back, her voice getting louder now. "Money versus family. Is that really the kind of person you are? You'd choose a party over your own sister, over your unborn niece or nephew." She put her hand back on her stomach, a deliberate, calculated gesture of emotional blackmail. "This baby deserves to have parents who are married. I deserve to have the wedding I've always dreamed of, and I can't wait 2 years for a venue like the Grand Willow to have an opening. You have it. You have it right there. All you have to do is make one phone call. It's the right thing to do. It's what a good brother would do." I just stared at her, my mind reeling. She had rehearsed this. She had built a narrative in her head where she was the victim, the one with the urgent, noble cause, and I was the selfish gatekeeper of her happiness. She had completely erased our feelings, our investment, our love, our entire relationship from the equation. We were just an obstacle. My fiancé stood up. She walked over and stood beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was grounding. It was a silent signal. We are a team. We are in this together. She looked at Ruby and her voice was no longer shocked. It was firm. It was the voice of a woman who was done being polite. "Ruby," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The answer is no. Absolutely not. We are not canceling our wedding. We are not giving you our venue. I am sorry about your situation, I truly am. But you are asking us to detonate our own lives to solve a problem that you created, and that is not going to happen." Ruby's face crumpled. The calculated composure vanished, replaced by a raw, ugly fury. Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. "You," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at my fiancé. "This is you, isn't it? You're turning him against me. He would do this for me if it wasn't for you. He's my brother." "She has nothing to do with it," I said, standing up to join my fiancé. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The shock was gone. The anger was there, but it was focused. I knew exactly what I had to do. The answer is no, Ruby. It's my decision. It's her decision. It's our decision. The conversation is over. We're not discussing this again. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling. The tears were streaming down her face now. It was a full-blown tantrum, the kind a toddler throws when you take away a toy they want. "You're selfish, Ezra," she sobbed. "You've always been the selfish one. Mom and Dad were right about you." And with that, she stood up, grabbed her purse, and stormed towards the door. She paused with her hand on the knob and turned back to look at us, her face a mess of tears and mascara. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You will regret this. I will make sure of it. I will make sure the entire family knows what you did, how you chose a party over your own blood." And then she was gone, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame on the wall rattled. The silence she left behind was deafening. My fiancé and I just stood there for a long time in the middle of our living room. The smell of the dinner we'd been cooking still hung in the air, a ghost of the happy, normal evening we were having just 15 minutes earlier. My fiancé finally let out a long, shaky breath and wrapped her arms around me. I held her tight, feeling her tremble slightly. "Well," she said, her voice muffled against my chest, "I guess we know what your mom was talking about now." I just nodded, resting my chin on top of her head. The minefield I had been dreading was no longer a distant threat. My sister had just walked into our home and planted the first one right at our feet, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, this was only the beginning. The war for our wedding had officially begun. Ruby was true to her word. The very next day, the calls started. First, it was my mom. Her voice was thick with a kind of forced disappointment she had perfected over the years. She didn't yell. She never yelled. She just expressed how troubled she was by my lack of family loyalty. She talked about Ruby's delicate condition and how stress was bad for the baby. She painted a picture of my sister alone and scared, just wanting to do the right thing and get married, and how I, her big brother, was standing in her way over something as trivial as a party. She never once mentioned the 12 months of planning. She never mentioned the non-refundable deposit that my fiancé and I had saved up for. She never mentioned that we were on the contract legally and financially. To hear her tell it, I was hoarding a family resource that my needy sister deserved more. I tried to explain. I laid out the timeline, the contract, the fact that Ruby's pregnancy happened a full 8 months after we had booked and paid for the Grand Willow Estates. My mom just sighed into the phone. "Ezra," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Sometimes family isn't about contracts and timelines. It's about doing what's right. And your sister needs this." Every conversation was a circular nightmare. It didn't matter what facts I presented. The emotional narrative had already been set in stone by Ruby. She was the pregnant damsel in distress, and I was the wicked troll guarding the bridge to her happiness. Then came the texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. It was a coordinated campaign. Some were sympathetic but firm. "You know your sister has a point." Others were more direct. "What is wrong with you?" "She's pregnant. Have some compassion." It felt like Ruby had handed out a script and everyone was reading their lines perfectly. My fiancé was getting it too. Her phone would buzz with messages from my relatives, people she barely knew, telling her she was being selfish and tearing our family apart. It was relentless. Every single day for 3 months, it was a new wave of guilt, a fresh attempt at manipulation. Our wedding planning, which should have been a joyful time, became an exercise in defending our own happiness. The final straw came about a month before the wedding. My dad called. He's usually the quiet one, the one who stays out of the drama. But this time, he was angry. He told me that Ruby had called him sobbing hysterically, saying she was so stressed that she was afraid she was going to lose the baby and it would be my fault. My fault. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The exhaustion and the frustration hardened into a cold, clear resolution. This wasn't about a venue anymore. This was about my sister using the most manipulative, vile tactic imaginable to emotionally blackmail me. She was weaponizing her own child. That night, I sat down with my fiancé. We were both just drained. The joy had been systematically leached out of our special day. I looked at her, and I saw the toll it was taking. I saw the worry in her eyes every time my phone rang. "I can't do this anymore," I said. "I can't let her ruin our wedding day. She's not going to stand up and make a scene. She's not going to corner you in the bathroom and whisper threats. She's not going to be there at all." My fiancé looked at me, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I'm sure. We have to protect this. We have to protect us." So I made the call. I called my parents and told them that Ruby was no longer invited to the wedding. I explained that her behavior over the past 3 months had made it clear she had no intention of celebrating with us, only of disrupting our day. The fallout was immediate and explosive. My mom called me heartless. My dad said I was disowning my own sister. But I stood firm. I told them they were of course still welcome, but if they chose to boycott the wedding in solidarity with Ruby, I would understand, though I would be disappointed. I told them the decision was final. It was the hardest conversation of my life, but when I hung up the phone for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. We were taking back control. The wedding day arrived. It was a perfect autumn day, the kind you dream of. The grounds at the Grand Willow Estates were stunning with golden leaves everywhere. As I stood at the altar waiting for my bride, I saw my parents slip into the back row. They looked sad, but they had come. And that small gesture meant the world to me. The ceremony was beautiful. When I saw my fiancé walking down the aisle, all the stress and drama of the past 3 months just melted away. In that moment, it was just us. We said our vows, we exchanged rings, and we were married. It was perfect. The reception was in full swing. The music was playing. People were laughing, and my wife and I were floating on a cloud of pure happiness. We had done it. We had weathered the storm. We were making our rounds, thanking our guests, when I saw him. My best man giving me a subtle, urgent look from across the room and nodding toward the main entrance. My heart sank. And there she was, my sister Ruby, all 28 years of her standing in the grand doorway. She was now 6 months pregnant, her condition obvious to everyone, and she was wearing a tight white dress. A white dress. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. She hadn't been invited. Her name wasn't on the list, but she had clearly just walked past the welcome table as if she belonged there, banking on the staff being too polite to stop a pregnant woman in a white dress at a wedding. Her eyes scanned the room, and then they locked on me. She had a look of triumphant fury on her face. This was her moment. This was the scene she had been planning for months. She took a step forward, ready to launch into her speech, ready to become the victim, the wronged sister in front of all my friends, my wife's family, my colleagues. But I was ready for her. I didn't engage. I didn't shout her name. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I simply caught the eye of our wedding planner, a wonderfully efficient woman who we had briefed on this exact possibility, and I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. That was the signal. Before Ruby could take a third step into the room, two large but impeccably dressed men materialized on either side of her. They weren't aggressive. They were calm, professional, and utterly immovable. They were the venue's head of security. One of them spoke to her in a low, polite voice that didn't carry across the room. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I'm sorry, but this is a private event. Your name is not on the guest list. We're going to have to ask you to leave." Ruby's face turned from triumph to disbelief, then to pure rage. Her plan was crumbling before it even began. "I'm not going anywhere," she shrieked, her voice finally cutting through the music. "That's my brother. I'm his sister." The security guard didn't even blink. "That may be, ma'am, but you are trespassing. You can leave quietly on your own, or we will escort you from the property. The choice is yours." She chose poorly. She tried to push past them, her voice rising to a full-blown scream. "Ezra, you can't do this to me. You're choosing a party over your own flesh and blood, over your family." A few guests turned to look, their faces a mixture of confusion and shock. But the security team was flawless. One guard placed a firm but gentle hand on her arm while the other opened the door. She continued to scream and struggle, but it was useless. They were professionals. Within 30 seconds of her arrival, Ruby was being physically escorted off the property, still shouting about how selfish and heartless I was. The doors swung shut behind her, and silence fell over the room for a brief moment. I took my wife's hand and walked to the center of the dance floor. I picked up the microphone from the DJ's booth. I took a deep breath. "Hey everyone," I said, my voice steady. "First of all, I want to thank you all for being here to celebrate with us. It means the world to us. And second, I want to apologize for that little interruption." I smiled at my new wife. "As some of you know, we've had some family drama leading up to this day, but we decided a long time ago that we would not let anything or anyone ruin this moment for us. This day is about love, about joy, and about starting our new life together with all of you, the people who truly support us." I raised my glass. "So please, let's not give that another moment of our attention. To my beautiful wife and to all of you." The room erupted in applause. My parents were even clapping, a look of what I hoped was understanding on their faces. The DJ, getting the cue, cranked up the music, and I pulled my wife into a dance. As we swayed to the music, she rested her head on my shoulder. "You handled that perfectly," she whispered. I held her tighter. The war was over. We had won. Not by fighting back, not by stooping to her level, but by holding our ground, protecting our peace, and refusing to let her poison our happiness. We spent the rest of the night celebrating our marriage, surrounded by love and support, and as I looked around the room at the smiling faces of our friends and family, I knew we had made the right choice. We had chosen us, and that was a victory worth fighting for.